The Hound in the Shadows. They say the woods are quiet at night. That's a lie. The woods are never quiet. They creak and rustle and moan, whispering secrets you're not supposed to hear. I used to love those sounds, that soft chorus of the forest. It soothed me, especially after a long day. But now I dread them. Now I hear something else. It started 2 weeks ago. I was out for my usual evening walk. I like to stretch my legs after dinner, clear my head, and let the stress of the day drain away. My route takes me about a mile down a dirt path into the woods, looping around a small pond, before circling back to my cabin. I've done it so many times, I could do it blindfolded. That night, though, something was different. I first noticed the smell. A foul, acrid stench wafted through the cool night air, like rotting meat left out in the sun. I wrinkled my nose and glanced around, but I didn't see anything unusual. The moon was high, casting long shadows across the path, but everything seemed normal enough. I shook it off, chalking it up to some dead animal decomposing nearby, and continued on. The smell grew stronger, and I could hear faint rustling in the underbrush to my left. My heartbeat quickened, but I kept walking, telling myself it was nothing. A raccoon, maybe, or a deer. I told myself I wasn't scared. I'd been out in these woods at night countless times. Nothing had ever happened. Then I saw it. It stood at the edge of the trail, just beyond the line of trees. At first, I thought it was a stray dog, a large one, with matted fur hanging off its frame in clumps. But then it stepped into the moonlight, and my breath caught in my throat. Its eyes were dark, almost black, with an unnatural glow behind them, as if a fire smouldered just beneath the surface. Its mouth hung open, and I could see its teeth, long, jagged, yellowed with age. The creature's fur was sparse in places, revealing patches of raw, mottled skin, and I swear I saw maggots crawling in those gaps. I froze, my mind screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It stood there, watching me, its head cocked to the side, in a way that seemed almost curious. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Then, without warning, the creature's lips pulled back into a snarl, and a low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees. I took a step back, then another, never taking my eyes off the thing. Its eyes followed my every move, and when I was about 10 feet away, it took a step forward. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my feet pounding against the dirt path, my breath ragged in my throat. I could hear it behind me, the sound of its claws scratching against the ground, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. By the time I reached my cabin, my lungs were burning, and my legs felt like they were about to give out. I slammed the door shut and locked it, leaning against it as I tried to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, and I could feel my heart thudding in my chest, the sound almost deafening in the stillness. For a while, I just stood there, listening. Silence. No scratching, no growling, nothing. I let out a shaky breath and laughed nervously at myself. It was just a dog, I thought, probably a sick or injured stray. I was overreacting, but the smell still lingered, faint but unmistakable. I turned on every light in the cabin and checked all the windows and doors, making sure they were locked tight. I didn't see anything outside, just the dark shapes of trees swaying gently in the wind. Slowly, I began to relax. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down in my favorite chair, trying to forget the look in its eyes, the glow that seemed almost human. I didn't sleep well that night. My dreams were filled with shadows, whispers, and the faint metallic scent of blood. I woke up several times, my heart racing, convinced I heard something outside. But every time I looked, there was nothing, just the wind and the trees, and the darkness pressing against the windows. The next morning, I told myself it was all in my head, a product of an overactive imagination. I had things to do, and I wasn't about to let a stray dog ruin my life. I went about my day as usual, trying to put the whole thing out of my mind. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, I heard it again. A low, rumbling growl just outside my window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, I reached for the flashlight on my bedside table and crept to the window. I shone the light outside, sweeping it across the yard, and then I saw them. Two glowing eyes staring back at me from the edge of the woods. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight, and scrambled for the door. I locked it, then barricaded it with a chair for good measure. I sat there for hours, clutching a kitchen knife, waiting for the sound of claws on the wood, but it never came. The next morning, I found deep gouges in the door, as if something had tried to claw its way inside. The wood was splintered, and there were clumps of black fur caught in the cracks. My hands shook as I traced the marks with my fingers. This wasn't just a stray dog. This was something else. Something wrong. I decided to stay inside after that. I didn't go for my walks, didn't even step outside to get the mail. I kept the doors and windows locked at all times, and I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every night I heard it. The growling, the scratching, the faint, almost mocking howl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I felt like I was losing my mind. And then I saw it again. It was a few days later. I was sitting in my living room, trying to distract myself with a book, when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned to the window, and there it was, standing in the middle of my yard watching me. Its eyes burned with that same unnatural glow, and its mouth hung open in a twisted grin. I grabbed my phone and dialed the local animal control. I tried to explain, but the dispatcher seemed unimpressed, as if I were just another paranoid caller. They promised to send someone out to check, but I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't something they could handle. That night, I heard something different. A low, guttural whisper, so faint I almost missed it. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it again, clearer this time. It was calling my name. I didn't sleep at all after that. I sat in the dark, clutching the knife, my ears straining for any sound, any sign that it was near. I was terrified to look out the window, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know if it was still there. And then I saw it. Not the hound, but something else. A figure standing just beyond the tree line. Tall, dark, and impossibly thin. It seemed to blend into the shadows, like it was part of the forest itself. Its eyes glowed with the same hellish light, and it was watching me. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me as I realized the truth. The dog, the thing, whatever it wasn't alone. It was a hunter, and it was working for something far worse. I was being stalked, hunted, and there was no escaping it. The days blurred together after that. I was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline and fear. I tried to call the police, but they found nothing unusual, nothing out of place. They dismissed me with a pat on the shoulder and some well-meaning advice to get some sleep. But how could I sleep when I knew it was out there, waiting? I barricaded myself inside, refusing to leave the house. I kept the lights on at all hours, but it didn't help. I could still hear it pacing around outside, scratching at the walls, whispering my name. It wanted me to know it was there, that it was waiting, watching, patient. One night, the whispering grew louder, more insistent. I could hear it through the walls, the floors, coming from everywhere at once. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest, and I gasped, clutching at my shirt. The whispering grew louder, filling my head, drowning out everything else. And then I saw it. The hound was inside, standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing like embers. It stared at me with that same twisted grin, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The room grew colder, the air thick with that foul, acrid stench. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't listen. I was paralyzed, trapped in place as the thing moved closer, its growl rumbling deep in its throat. The sound was low, almost like a chuckle, as if it found my fear amusing. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I could feel its hot, rancid breath on my skin, the heat radiating from its eyes. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I watched, helpless, as it crept closer and closer, its movements slow and deliberate, like it was savoring every second. Suddenly it stopped, inches from my face. Its eyes bored into mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something in those eyes, something ancient and malevolent, a darkness that went beyond mere animal instinct. This thing was no dog. It was something far older, something that had no place in the world of the living. Then, without warning, it turned and walked away, its body fading into the shadows, as if it were never there. The whispering stopped, and the room fell silent. I was left alone in the dark, my heart racing, my mind spinning. I knew then that it was playing with me, testing me. I was its prey, and it was enjoying the hunt. The next morning, I found fresh claw marks on the inside of my door, deep, jagged gouges that hadn't been there the night before. The sight of them sent a shiver down my spine. It had been inside, and I hadn't even known. I needed help. I couldn't handle this on my own, but who would believe me? The police already thought I was crazy, and animal control had brushed me off. I had no family, no close friends. I was alone, but I had to try something. Anything. I grabbed my phone and started searching for answers, looking up anything I could find about strange creatures, hellhounds and demons. Most of it was nonsense, but there were stories, legends, tales of men hunted by beasts that weren't quite alive. And in every story, the hunter was never alone. I came across an old forum dedicated to the paranormal, filled with discussions about demons and spirits, and I posted my story. Within minutes, I got a response. A man named Samuel, who claimed to be an expert in demonology, messaged me. His words were blunt. "If what you say is true, you are in grave danger. The creature you describe is a hellhound, a servant of a demon, sent to hunt lost souls. You need to leave your house. Now." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a monster. It was a hellhound, a creature from the depths of hell itself. I replied frantically, asking what I should do, where I could go, how to get rid of it. Samuel's response was swift. "You can't get rid of it. Not easily. The demon that sent it has marked you. The hound won't stop until it catches you, but there is a way to buy time. You need to surround yourself with a barrier, something it can't cross." I asked him what kind of barrier, desperate for any solution. His reply was cryptic. "Salt, iron, symbols of protection. Keep a light burning at all times and do not go outside after dark." Salt? Iron? This sounded insane, but I was out of options. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the salt, and began pouring it along every doorway and window frame. I found an old horseshoe in my shed and nailed it above the front door. I carved crude protective symbols into the wood with my pocket knife, hoping it would be enough. I felt foolish, but fear drives you to strange lengths. That night, I kept every light on. The faint hum of electricity, a small comfort against the dark that pressed in from outside. I waited, listening, every nerve on edge. Hours passed, and for a while it was quiet. But then I heard it again, the low, rumbling growl, followed by a faint scratching at the walls, the sound of claws dragging across the wood. I could hear its breath, heavy and wet, as it paced outside the windows, circling the house. I clutched the knife, my hands slick with sweat, and waited. The growling grew louder, more aggressive, as if it was frustrated, and then I heard a different sound, a deep, guttural voice, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The words were harsh, filled with a dark, almost mocking tone. I felt a wave of cold wash over me, and I knew it was here. The demon, the master of the hound. I stayed awake all night, jumping at every sound, every creak of the house. But somehow the salt, the iron, the symbols, they seemed to work. The thing didn't come inside, not that night at least. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and creeping terror. The hound was relentless, always there, always watching. It would sit just beyond the line of salt, staring at me with those burning eyes, its teeth bared in a hideous grin. Sometimes it would growl, low and menacing, or pace back and forth like a caged animal. I could feel its hunger, its desire to reach me, to drag me into whatever hell it had come from. I kept up the defenses, pouring fresh salt every day, reinforcing the symbols, keeping iron tools nearby. But I knew it was only a matter of time. The hound was patient. It was waiting for me to make a mistake. One night, I woke to the sound of glass breaking. My heart leapt into my throat. I grabbed the knife and rushed into the living room. One of the windows was shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floor. The salt line beneath the window was disturbed, broken, and then I saw it. The hound, standing in the middle of the room, its eyes burning like hot coals. It had crossed the threshold. The protections had failed. I stumbled back, my hands trembling. The creature took a step toward me, and I could feel the heat radiating from its body. The air around it shimmered like a mirage, and the foul stench was overwhelming. I could hear the voice again, the demon's voice, whispering in my mind, taunting me. "You can't escape," it hissed. "You are mine." I felt a wave of despair crash over me. I was trapped, cornered, with nowhere to run. The hound lunged, and I swung the knife, but it passed right through, as if it were made of smoke. I fell to the ground, scrambling back, my mind racing. The creature laughed, a deep, guttural sound that filled the room. "Why do you fight?" the voice asked. "You are already dead." I felt a cold, clawed hand grip my shoulder, and I screamed. I could feel its breath on my face, hot and rancid, its eyes boring into mine. I was losing myself, slipping into darkness. I had no strength left to resist. But then I remembered something Samuel had said. Light. I reached for the lamp on the table and knocked it over, sending it crashing to the floor. The bulb shattered, sending sparks flying, and for a moment there was a flash of bright, blinding light. The hound recoiled, its eyes narrowing, and the hand released me. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding, and grabbed a candle from the shelf, lighting it with trembling hands. The flame flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, but the hound seemed to retreat, its form growing faint, as if it were dissolving into the darkness. I knew then that the light was my only hope. I had to keep it away, had to find a way to break the demon's hold. But how? I had no idea where to start, no idea who to turn to. The whispers were growing louder again, the growl returning. I didn't have much time. The next day I received another message from Samuel. "You must leave. The hound will not stop, and neither will its master. There is a place, an old church deep in the woods. Go there. It is the only place the demon cannot follow." I had no choice. I packed a bag, grabbed what little food I had, and set out into the woods. I knew it was a risk, but I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I could feel the darkness closing in, the hound's presence growing stronger. The journey was long, the path winding and treacherous. I could hear the creature behind me, its footsteps heavy, its breath hot on my neck. It was close, too close. I ran, pushing myself harder, the shadows lengthening around me. The trees seemed to close in, the air growing colder, thicker. And then I saw it, the church. Old, crumbling, but still standing. I pushed open the door and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I could hear the hound outside, snarling, scratching at the wood. But it did not come in. For now, I was safe. But I knew it wouldn't last. The demon was out there, waiting, watching. And the hound would never stop. I could only wait in the darkness, knowing that eventually it would find a way in. And when it did, there would be nowhere left to run.